Good evening, everyone. My name is Ross Emmett, and I'm the director of the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty here at ASU. Welcome to this event. The Perspectives on Economic Liberty lecture series is hosted by as I said, the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty, which is part of the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. The Perspectives lecture series emerges from the center's mission, which is to evaluate the contribution of economic liberty for human betterment. Our goal is to advance research that affects liberty-enhancing policy, increases public and academic awareness of the history and philosophy of economic liberty, and leads to more voluntary bottom-up governance. Before I introduce this evening's topic and speakers, I'd like to take a moment to make two announcements. First, ASU has once again populated the Goldwater Chair, named after, obviously, the Senator Goldwater, for 2023-2024. And that person is going to be Tim Sandiford, who is a Goldwater Institute staff person. Tim is going to teach a graduate seminar for the School for Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership in the spring 2024 semester, entitled The American Dream, Economic Liberty as an American Institution. The course will focus on the social, cultural, and legal influence of economic freedom in America. Some undergraduate students may be able to participate in the course. So if you're a student and are interested in taking a course that actually is a graduate course, an evening, once-a-week course, please contact Scuttle's office. If you are a graduate student, you can also take that course, and by doing the same thing, contact the Scuttle office and enroll. People in the members of the public who would like to take the course can apply to take the course as well, if you are able to commit to attending the course and being present for the course throughout the semester. What you'd want to do, any of you would want to do, is contact the School for Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership, ask to speak to the Director of Graduate Studies. His name is Scott Porwancher. It's a kind of odd name, so Porwander, Porwancher. There's a C in there, Ancher, Porwancher. And and then they could get you signed up or at least give you information. Secondly, the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty, who's the host for this evening's discussion, is proud to host the Avenues to Opportunity Conference. That's an all-day conference on December 1st, 2023, at the Omni Tempe Hotel. ASU students are now eligible to register for that conference for free. It's not a terribly expensive conference for people who aren't students, but for students it's free. Of course, as an economist, I'm bound to tell you that nothing comes for free, because you're going to have to put up with something, or you have other uses of your time that you can apply. Economists always mess everything up, right? By telling you that there's an opportunity cost to everything you do. Now on to this evening's speakers. Representative Alma Hernandez, Democrat from Tucson, and Representative Travis Grantham, Republican, from Gilbert, have agreed to join us to discuss issues facing minority entrepreneurs. A recent study showed that Arizona ranked 32nd among the U.S. states for success among minority entrepreneurs, with 15.6% of all Arizona businesses and 18.2% of startups under 2 years old having minority owners. Earlier this year, the Arizona legislature passed HB 2509 with bipartisan support. The bill, sometimes called the Tamale bill, would have relaxed the rules for food products Arizonans can make in their own kitchens to sell. The bill was ultimately vetoed by Governor Hobbs. Elvia Diaz, editorial page editor for the Arizona Republic, is joining us tonight as the moderator for the discussion with Representatives Hernandez and Speaker Pro Tem Grantham to discuss how we can create avenues to opportunity. Yes, we do like that term at Scuttle, at Cecil. Avenues to opportunity, it sounds great. Nice language. Avenues to opportunity for the Arizona Hispanic community and to improve the climate for minority entrepreneurship in Arizona. Thank you all for coming, and I will turn this over now to you to get us going.
Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you all of you for being here. I oversee the editorial pages at the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. So you can go to opinions.azcentral.com and you will see all the columns, the editorials, everything that we published in the opinions section. And so we have a range of points of views there. So I really encourage you to go there. So it is an honor for me to be here and be with you too. I was actually telling them that I covered the Arizona legislature in the early 2000s, and it's so different right now, so different. So, I mean, who would have thought that tamales was going to be one of the hottest issues, not just in Arizona, but across the nation, right? I mean, this bill really grabbed headlines everywhere. So I would like to get into the bill itself, and then we'll talk about Latino businesses in Arizona and what can we do to actually help them. So we'll talk for the first half hour, 45 minutes or so, and then I'll open it up for questions for all of you, because I really, really want you to have the opportunity to ask your own questions. So that will be towards the end. So I'll be writing them or, mental notes on your own questions. So I would appreciate that very much, and we'll use this. So a show of hands first. How many of you have actually eaten tamales before? Okay, so how many of you have eaten tamales just made at home? Okay, fewer. So how many of you have eaten tamales bought from legit restaurants or businesses and have it on the streets? Yay! So all of them. Great. I mean, a lot of you. So let's get to it. You already heard the description about House Bill 2509. I personally didn't like the name, the tamale bill. I'm going to ask you why that name came up. But so before we get to that, it would have relaxed the rules around food products Arizonans can make in their own kitchens to sell, specifically the sale of products like tamales, cheesecakes, and other temperature-sensitive food. So that's what we're talking about. Now, I told you at the beginning that I was at the legislature before, and obviously as a reporter, editor, I have seen it all, or I thought I did, here in Arizona. So to have a Republican and a Democrat work together is not that rare, really. So this is not rare in the 23 years that I've been covering Arizona politics. But this bill, the tamale bill, was actually approved by the majority of Democrats and Republicans. That's rare, I think. I mean, I don't usually see that. You heard that Governor Hobbs vetoed it. Republicans who sponsored the bill tried to override the governor's signature. But they needed a super majority to do that. The Democrats, and we'll come back to that, flipped. So they first voted for the bill with Republicans. When they tried to override it, the Democrats flipped and decided not to override it. And so it's dead. So we're the status quo. If you're confused, please ask us before, but this is what happened. So why, in your perspective, why was this such a big deal? Why this legislation made national news? And both of you sponsored the bill. We'll be with you, Representative.
Okay, thank you, Alvia, and thank you all for coming. I'm going to clear up one thing first. Nothing you said was incorrect, but Alma, Representative Hernandez, she stuck with it all the way, even voting to override the governor. So most of the Democrats flipped, not all. She and I think 4 others.
Yeah, 4 others.
All who have the last name Hernandez, which I'm trying to figure out. And one Sosi, who's a Native American from, I think he's Navajo.
No.
Yeah. Stuck with the Republican caucus to try to override the governor's veto of the bill. So the question, back to the question, I think your question was why?
Why, from your perspective, this legislation is such a big deal? The status quo is here, and as far as I know, no one has stopped selling tamales.
Right. Well, here's my perspective, and it's not just about tamales. Now, it got this name, the Tamale Bill, which I didn't do. The title of the bill was actually cottage food production, I think, or
Cottage foods.
yeah. There may be one more key word after cottage foods. But there's a myriad of things, as you all probably can imagine and maybe know, that are produced at home and sold just like a tamale. It could be salsa, it could be cookies, it could be banana bread, it could be anything, right? The tamale thing got thrown out there. It's great. We all love tamales, especially around the holiday season. It's like, oh, they're all coming up. You know, we can buy them from our favorite vendor, family, friend, whoever. Obviously, because of Arizona's Hispanic culture, I mean, we have a large block of our population that is Hispanic, that probably enjoys that type of at-home cottage food production more than something else somewhere else in the country. I think that's a wonderful thing. I actually think it's good that it got the name because the name is what made the bill famous. Mm-hmm. You know, the name Tamale Bill, cottage food, everybody's like, yeah. But as soon as it gets the name Tamale Bill, everybody's excited about it, turns up their TV, actually sees it in the headline, is like, oh, what's this all about? I like tamales. And it just grabbed people's attention. But more than anything, people do this already. And it's sad because a lot of people are doing it and breaking the law. And I'm not saying that all of these people are being punished with felonies or fined $500 or sent to prison, but they could be. And it's not right to force people to live their lives in the simple task of making a tamale at home and selling it to friends or giving it to family or putting it in a food cart out in front of your home or a store and selling it to people as a vendor. That should not be criminalized, and that's truly what we were trying to fix. Tamales became the food, but it's about a lot more than tamales. It's truly about freedom to just do as you want and as you please.
Representative Hernandez, you're correct that you did not flip. Thank you for that. So from your perspective, why is this such a big deal? And most importantly, what's going to happen now? I mean, the status quo is there. The governor is not going to go anywhere. Is this going to come back? Are you going to try to bring it back this coming legislative session?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying, for me, this was personal. And I was very open and clear when we were working on this from the beginning that I had a very different perspective and even just a different theory on how this should work and what it looks like, because we come from different backgrounds, we come from different communities. And I was very fortunate growing up that my mother, who came here from Mexico, she was a biochemist. She used to own her own laboratory in Mexico, came here like many people do, and just could not continue to work in the field that she used to work in. She refused to go back to school to do more schooling because she had been doing it for so long. So she ended up being a stay-at-home mom, and my father worked construction. And there were times were rough, they were tough. And my mother had to start making cakes to sell on the weekends so that we could provide for our family. So I'm coming at this from a very personal perspective because I'm very fortunate that my mother was able to help when we needed the help at home. And, now I'm in the legislature and trying to do things that will help other people, but I came from it from a very personal perspective. I have a lot of family members that also sell not just tamales, but they sell other items like tortillas and things of that nature that are very common in my culture. So it's not just about tamales. It was something that I don't even know how the name stuck, but it did. It was never just about tamales, and I just want to make sure that that's very clear. There are many people, especially in my district, that sell not just tamales, but a variety of cottage foods, of products that they make at home. And as a public health professional, I know a lot of people said, well, this is a health issue and this is going to kill people essentially if they're buying products on the streets. And I personally just disagree with that. And I guess this is where, you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but we again came together and said, well, we both agree that we should be giving people the ability if they want to make cottage foods to be able to provide for their families. We should give them the opportunity to do that, especially when they're not engaging in something that's, in my opinion, hurting or killing people. They're just trying to make an honest living. And let me tell you all, I represent a district in Tucson. I know that we have very different districts, but I represent a district in Tucson that is very diverse, both in incomes and community. I represent part of the Pascuayaqui Reservation, which on their reservation, they sell a lot of cottage homemade foods to get by. And I also represent part of South Tucson, which is the community that I'm talking about specifically, that sells a lot of products, whether it's outside of grocery stores, outside of restaurants. So it is something that's very common that is done in my community. And now, after all of this has happened, it's actually had a really negative impact on this community.
How so? And then I'll also want to go back to you.
And it's important for me to highlight this because I do believe that we tried our best to do something really good in trying to, for me, it was more of a criminal justice reform issue, not health. And I think that's how I've always felt about it. But I've noticed that even when I'm eating at restaurants in my own district, we used to have people come in and sell stuff. The owners used to let them and allow them to do so because they're in their right to do that if they want. And I've noticed that now, ever since this happened, people are not allowed to sell inside of the store, inside of the restaurants anymore. And that's unfortunate because these are people that I grew up with seeing for years, coming into either the seafood restaurant or the taco place, who are now being told, because it's illegal, we can't have you come in and sell your product. And I think that was never the intention on our end, but it has had that effect, unfortunately, in the community.
So what I wanted to follow up with you, can you guys hear me okay? Because something happened with the mic. Okay. So you talked about economic liberty. So at what time economic freedom, if I remember correctly, the phrase that you use right now. So at what point is economic freedom and health regulation? And in this case, it's interesting that you talk about the impact because nothing changed. The fact that the law did not approve, I mean, it means the status quo remained exactly the way that it was before when they were selling all the stuff before. So at what point or when do economic liberty end when the public health issue begins?
Great question. Now, I'm going to get political. Public health is being used as an excuse to regulate something that should just be operating freely in the market. There is no reason to say public health is the reason why you can't cook a tamale at home in your home kitchen and sell it to somebody. So there's already a cottage food industry, and it's licensed in the state. There's 5 other states that have cottage food industries. Of those 5 states, I think 3 of them have done what we were trying to do. They've done it already. We're trying to expand what types of foods can be sold, made at home and sold. Things like cooked meats, certain vegetable blends, things that bring salsa together. Obviously tamales have meat in them and it's cooked. There's certain cheeses. I'm a common sense guy. I've been made sick from eating at a restaurant. Who's gotten sick eating at a restaurant? Okay, yeah, about maybe half the crowd.
Like I have.
Restaurants have all of the regulations, all of the restrictions, all of the things on them, inspectors coming in, state agencies governing them, overseeing them. They pay fees, they have permits, they have licenses. This gigantic web of bureaucracy to operate as a restaurant. And they make people sick sometimes. There has actually not been one documented case, just so everybody knows, and this is legitimate data that's kept, one documented case of foodborne illness being spread through the cottage food industry from a seller to a buyer. And further, I would argue that if a cottage food producer who makes tamales or cookies or banana bread or whatever in their kitchen and labels it with Grantham family salsa, and sells it at the local farmer's market or maybe in front of Food City, I would argue that that family, that person, they're going to take enormous pride and be very careful about the product they put out there. Because guess what? You sell that to somebody when you only sell to 20 or 30 people, and you make somebody sick, you know, you're not going to keep selling your product. And under Arizona law, you already have to have a food handler's card. You have to have basic training. You have to have all these things already to understand how to properly prepare food, how to safely handle food, and how to package it and how to distribute it. So it's a bit of a red herring. What we do in politics oftentimes is we pick something that's scary to the general public to try to get them to agree that the idea is not a good one. In this specific instance, I'll put it this way, and again, when I say that side, I'm not talking specifically about Alma, because Democrats and Republicans both bow to certain special interests. We both have our vices, and one is no better than the other. But in this specific instance, special interests won the day. And those special interests are things like a restaurant association that has a very powerful lobby down at the state capitol. They're protective of their restaurant licensing and their ability to operate and sell food out of their establishments, and they don't want competition from people who can operate in and out of their homes, like a home-based business. So that was very unfortunate to see. That is what happened in this instance, and in my humble opinion, health is not the issue. Health is an excuse to cover up the real issue.
And before I go to you, I just want to let you know that one of the most popular features on accentral.com is restaurant inspections. All the time. When we put that up, it's incredibly popular. Everyone is looking at that. So there's some gross stuff going on.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
right.
I can't imagine.
For sure.
So I'll just echo a little bit of what he said.
You can agree with me.
I don't know about that.
She's gonna
I just
echo
wanted to
that.
get her on the
Right.
record. I wanted to get
Yeah, on the record. So I will say three things. One, again, I understand that a lot of what was said, a lot of the rhetoric was really around health safety, or food safety, sorry. I will say that I've never met anyone who has been severely sick by tamales or tortillas that were sold by one of the individuals in my community, at least. I'm speaking from my community. And secondly, I believe that as an adult, I would like to believe that we all make decisions that we feel are the right ones for ourselves. And no one is forcing anyone to buy these products. If you want to buy the product, you can buy it by your own will. No one is telling you you have to buy the tamales from the lady down in Tucson or the person down in Gilbert. Like, no one is forcing you to do that. So my assumption, and I hope that this is just like a general thing that we would agree that is reality. If you are purchasing something off the street, you likely know that it is not made in a professional kitchen. And also, we heard a lot about the food, the safety part of it, and the aspect of the Department of Health and all of this. And again, I studied public health, for undergrad, grad school, did further training at Johns Hopkins in epidemiology and biostats. We can go on and on about health and diseases because that's what I studied. And I just never felt that was one of the fights for this piece of legislation. I think that we should all be able to make our own decisions. And if you want to buy the tamales or the tortillas, then do so. If you don't, you don't have to. And again, I don't know anyone who's been severely ill, but also I would gladly put my mother's kitchen up against anybody else's kitchen. Like, I will say that, a lot of what was being said was like the cleanliness or, that was never a question for me because, as Representative Grantham mentioned, people who are selling these products do not want to have a bad reputation. Let me tell you, that spreads quickly, whether on social media or word of mouth. If I've been asked so many times, like, hey, do you know where I can buy like green corn tamales? I'm like, oh, I have this lady who actually makes a really good I always ask, like,
I know this lady that knows a lady.
Yeah, that knows a lady. Like, that's just the reality of this business. And the whole idea of them trying to, take over the restaurant. is it on? Okay. Trying to take over the restaurant business and trying to be a competitor. I'm sorry, but people that are selling these products are not, and by any means trying to compete against a restaurant. They're just trying to get by. And let me tell you that in my community, people who are selling a dozen of tortillas for $5 or $6 is doing it out of necessity. They are not doing it because it's a fun thing to do, to stand outside of a corner of a street and ask people as they're walking by. Like, I know a lot of families who they have no other way to bring an income, and that's what they do. And do you really think that a child who usually stands with their parents or their abuelos or abuelas really is excited to be as a 5 or 6 year old with their parent selling things on the street? Like, that's just not the reality. People who are doing this, in my opinion, are doing it out of necessity and because they take pride in the products that they're making.
And I'm going to agree with you on the fact that
I guess that's on the record.
It's on the record. I'm going to agree with you on the fact about who lost and who won here, the special interest. And I always say this: when a legislative bill dies or moves forward, who's behind that? So all you have to do is really research who didn't want this bill in the end, and so who won in this case. So if we live in a state where a third of the population is Hispanic, African Americans, Asian Americans, and other minorities are a huge presence here in our state, so it's hugely important. This study that was quoted earlier shows that Arizona is the 32nd best state for minority entrepreneurs to succeed, with minorities owning 15.6% of all Arizona businesses and 18% of startups under 2 years old. I believe that's what you were reading earlier today. So when I heard it, I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. The headline sounds pretty good. Arizona is 32nd, but then 32nd out of 50 states, is that good for minorities? So I'll go back to you. Is that a great headline, or minorities really have it tough here?
No, it's not a great headline. It's better than 50th, right? I mean, and when you look at the differences between number 1 and number 32, they may not be vast, but yeah, it would be great to be closer to the front of the line. I've got a slightly different take. While the minority aspect is extremely important and it's very honorable, it matters for everybody. And one thing I get a little bit frustrated with in politics is how we focus on one group and say, oh, this is good for that group. Let's do it. Well, it's actually good for everybody. I live in Gilbert, Arizona. I am not LDS, but a third of my voting electorate is. Guess what? They can and jar a lot of food. They make a lot of food at home. They love having bake sales. It's a good thing.
But no one is going to disagree that it's a good thing. I agree, and I think you would all agree with that is a good thing for everyone. But why minorities are the ones that have to do this? Why are Latinos the ones that have to be, making tamales and selling? And I don't think it's because they want to. I think it's because they can't get loans. They can't have the same opportunities that others. So if you don't mind speaking to that, and then you as well.
I do think that problem exists, especially with maybe a family who's immigrated here recently. I mean, you don't have financials, you don't have tax returns, you don't have citizenship. How are you supposed to go borrow money? It's hard enough when you have those things. So yes, startups, very difficult for that group of people. So this is a way to get started. We should be making it easier for anybody. But you're right, especially these groups that are challenged to begin with in this realm. We should be making it easier for them to go out, set up shop, and produce a product that's good and safe and labeled appropriately. And by the way, the state law that currently exists still requires, if you make something and sell it like this, you have to label it accordingly so that the buyer knows they're buying something made in a home kitchen. You have to have a food handler's card. I mean, it's not just a total free-for-all. So there's some good rules in place. But yeah, back to your question, absolutely minorities kind of face the toughest uphill battle when it comes to succeeding, especially when they're new to our country. And I would hope and think that would make both political parties, quite honestly, again, here I go on politics, we all try to pander to certain groups of people to get votes, to get support, and yet we're not always supportive of those people. So I would hope they're paying attention. I would hope you're paying attention. And I know she's paying attention and I'm paying attention. And sometimes it makes you as a politician have to say and do unpopular things amongst your peers or within your caucus to get these types of things accomplished. I mean, Alma is like a punching bag sometimes from her in her party. And I'm a very far-right conservative. I'm getting called a rhino sometimes from people in my party. So, I mean, you know, it is what it is. Yeah. But when you're doing the right thing and you're actually on the side of freedom, you can't go wrong.
Representative.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm very involved with a lot of the national Hispanic organizations and groups that are for elected officials. And, you know, some of the data that we've seen, it says, you know, 1 in every 200 new businesses that serve Latinos, 1 in every 200 start a business. And it's really interesting to see the numbers, because if you look at the data and you're paying attention, I believe it was something like 72% of those that do start, entrepreneurs that do start a business that are Latino or Hispanic, a lot of times they started with the support of their family and friends. A lot of times it's really difficult. It's, as you said, it's difficult enough when you're a citizen here to be able to get loans. So a lot of times the funding aspect is a really big obstacle, truly. When you come from a community that, you know, you didn't have a law already, and you need a lot of times capital to start, and a lot of people just don't have it and don't have really access to it. And one of the things that I keep reminding people is in my area, at least, a lot of these cottage food vendors are undocumented people, are parents of dreamers, are parents of people who are trying to go to school and get by, and that's the reality. And it has nothing to, for me, it's not even political, which is why from day one, when I said I support this, I think it's important. I stuck with it all the way through, because even having conversations with my own parents, you know, my mother always tells me, like, never forget where you come from. You know, you can go on and do great things, but always remember how you got there. And at the end of the day, that's why it was so personal to me, was I know how much my parents struggled, and I know that my mother was not trying to intentionally hurt anyone by selling cakes on the weekends to be able to pay the electric bill, right? So, you know, for me, it was very personal, but I do know, and I know a lot of those families that do actually struggle to try to start a business. And why it's so difficult is because they just don't have the ability to be able to qualify for a lot of the programs. And, you know, I hear a lot that there's a lot of programs, like different cities have things going on, or counties, but again, it goes back to the population that I'm specifically talking about already can't apply for those. They're already not able to. So how can we help support them? Is the conversation, I know you asked, like, where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. And I think those are conversations that we'll have to have in this upcoming session. What that looks like, truly, I don't know what that looks like exactly. I'm currently trying to figure out ways, because like I said, it did have a negative impact in my community. So how can we go back to fixing an issue that's now gone, in my opinion, it's been overblown now. And how can we go and fix that by providing opportunities for people in the community as well?
So do you have ideas, Representative? I was going to say, let's just forget about the word minorities and just say, how can you help poor people to have access to capital to start those businesses? But we really can't ignore the other part. So yes, you know, the poor population are the ones that don't have access to banking, to loans, to others. But so let's break it out. So what ideas do you have? Specific ideas, and same to you as well, specific ideas on how to help narrow the gap of income inequality of poor people, and then specifically the undocumented population, because that is huge. We can't ignore that at all, because that population doesn't have access to the programs that you were mentioning. So what specific ideas do you think the legislature can tackle?
Right before I answer this, it brought to mind when we were talking about, you know, people getting started and not having access to capital. William Hershey, was it William? I think he started in his kitchen trying to make the peanut butter cup, like perfect that recipe. And look what that is today, right? He didn't have anybody giving him money. He didn't have anybody I think actually family of immigrants, very similar, just 100 years ago. What can we do? We can remove barriers to entry, okay? And when I say remove barriers to entry, it means less regulation, less restriction on people being allowed to do very simple things and live a free and prosperous life. I mean, here you get right back to economic prosperity. You can't have economic prosperity when government's standing there saying, you got to check these 17 boxes and fill out all these forms and meet all these qualifications before you can sell a tamale. I mean, think of how ridiculous that is. So what we have to do is you have to look at this holistically. You have to say, okay, if I just immigrated to this country, documented, undocumented, I actually, it shouldn't make a huge difference. I have nothing. Let's pretend I have nothing. How am I supposed to accomplish anything if you're going to stand there and tell me if the state is going to get in my way and say, sorry, you can't do that. Sorry, that's off limits. Sorry, that's illegal. Sorry, that takes a $1,000 fee and you got to have a commercial kitchen. I mean, that's very simple. You remove those barriers to entry. You make it easier for people to operate, to live. You let the economy go. You let it flourish.
And some ideas about reducing the income inequality.
Make it easier for people to make an income. I am not a believer in redistribution. I don't think you should take from the rich and give to the poor. But I do think you should make it easier for people who are facing very challenging times and trying to make a living. You should make it easier for them to get access to capital. And one way you make it easier for them to get access to capital is you put less barriers in their way. A low tax structure. We lowered the state income tax to 2.5%. That's a big deal. When that person might make some money finally, guess what? They're going to pay a lot less than they would have a few years ago. And they can reinvest it in their business like most people do. All of those things matter. All of those things. And Goldwater Institute's a great organization to follow that champions a lot of these things. This specific bill, just so you know, was actually brought to me and discussed in its infancy with Institute for Justice. They're out there looking for ways to deregulate, make life easier for everyone. So I think that is really how you get at the root of income inequality. Because otherwise you start talking about programs that take from one and give to another, and that's not income inequality, that's redistribution, and that's a whole different subject matter.
Do you agree? Any other thoughts? I mean, the programs exist, so a lot of people have access to those except the undocumented. So, any other thoughts?
I do believe, and even this last year, we approved legislation in the budget that would include money for these micro loans. And again, it goes back to, I'm trying to figure out what can we do to make it accessible, right? Because at the end of the day, anything that's tied to the state will require all of these things that we're talking about that are the problem. So it is difficult when it comes to that. If it was up to me, I'd say as long as they can prove that they have a running business, then I don't care whether I don't go to the corner of the street and while someone is selling whatever it is and say, are you documented or are you not documented? Like, I could care less, right? In my opinion, I am going about my business. They can go about their business. As long as they're doing something that is not hurting anybody, I don't care. So at the end of the day, we do need to find really put things into place that are actually going to help, whether that's some sort of grant program. I know that those operate a little differently. So perhaps a grant program would be worth looking at, but also working with our community centers and making sure that if we want to talk about community kitchens and giving people an opportunity to be able to scale and do a little more, then we should, as a state, if we're regulating it, be able to put up some sort of funding so that people have access to this, right? There are a lot of people that in their homes just make very small batches of things, right? Okay, great. If we want to help them, let's go ahead and bring them into a community kitchen where they can have accessibility if that's what they choose to do, right? So there's other states also that are looking at this right now because, of course, Arizona is not the only state that has cottage food vendors. I know that there's other legislation that has worked in other states, so looking at doing a little bit of research, I'm trying my best. Right now it's a busy time. Finals are coming up in 2 weeks. So I'm trying, but looking at what other states are doing that is working to help that population that we're talking about, that's something that is in the works. It's just not something that's very clear at this moment, only because things do get complicated, especially with politics, as you know.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I'm reintroducing the legislation with a couple of minor changes that aren't of grand scale, but they were just certain language changes that a few people would have been more comfortable with. Shouldn't change the vote tally. But what I'm going to try to do this year, and I'm actually reintroducing this bill, tomorrow is our first day to introduce legislation in the Arizona House, is I'm going to try to put it on her desk again. And this is the politics side of it. People are going to act a lot differently after the beating we all took over this specific bill, and especially that veto, when there's a midterm election. Unfortunately,
You think it will pass because of that, or
I
you
think
will
it has
have
a better chance this year if we pass it out of both of our chambers, because there's a midterm election about 6 or so months away from the end of session.
And you'll support it again?
Well, now, because of the situation that I've explained, we do need to have conversations because, as I mentioned, I was all about it from day one. I think what I'm seeing in my district now, I still support the idea, but now I need to figure out what can we add in there that's actually going to help with the situation that I'm now dealing with, and that I don't know about all the other districts in Arizona, but specifically mine. We are going to have to make some sort of change so that it's not exactly what was on the desk, because it did have a negative impact, at least in my district, because of the restaurant owners who are now like cracking down on it when they shouldn't be.
One of the, I've had very few conversations with the governor or her staff, in fact, no conversations over what would make this bill okay. A few members that voted against the bill did say that they want things like food inspection
Home kitchen
officers,
inspections.
whatever you want to call them, state inspectors that go into restaurants to be able to enter people's home kitchens. And that's just a non-starter.
Yeah, it's a non-starter.
So if that's going to be the bar I have to
Right.
meet, I can't ever get there because I won't.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the bill as it was, because it passed with massive support. Just to give you a quick idea, I mean, we have a 60-member House. It passed out 52-8, okay? We have a 30-member Senate. It passed out 26-4. When we tried to override her veto, I only got 35 votes in the House. So I lost nearly 20
Right.
on political divide for no reason other than politics. So I can't allow inspectors to come into people's homes and root through their kitchens. That's not what we're going to do. So we'll see where we get this next year.
And I'll just make it very clear, that's
Right.
and he knows how
Yeah,
I feel about that.
I know.
I do not, that is a non-starter, as well as caps on how much people can
Right,
sell. I
right,
also do
right.
not feel like that is definitely not something, and I've said it publicly and I'll say it again, I cannot support us putting a cap on the income of someone who's just trying to get by, as well as home inspections. Like, those are two things that I just cannot agree to. That's not what I was talking about. I'm talking more about specifically how to deal with the situation of the restaurants who they're in their right to say no or yes, right? But now that they're in their mind, it's illegal, so you can't do it. How do we fix that is more of what we need to try to figure out at this point.
Okay, we're going to get to questions in a few minutes. I think it's about that time, right? So before I go to you, you talked about getting rid of state regulations to help people, to make it easy for people to make a living. And clearly, Representative Fernandez, you agree with that if you agree with this bill. So what other state regulations would you agree to ease to make it easy for people to make a living? Are there any other regulations that you would support?
Want me to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'll go because it might help. It might remind Alma a little bit of something I'm going to speak about. And I think I can't remember how we both. I know how I voted. I can't remember how she voted. we had one of the biggest epic fights down there along these lines over cosmetology a couple of years ago.
Blow
Now,
drying.
It was a blow dryers
bar
thing where the board and a lot of folks who own salons that were very powerful wanted blow dry bars to have the same cosmetology license that they had to do things like chemically treat, change colors of hair, right? You know, all these things, peelings and all the. And it was kind of ridiculous. It's like, really, just to dry somebody's hair, we're going to make them go through years of school and all this stuff.
Well, you don't want your hair to be burned, right? I don't.
Well,
if I go
right,
to-
but then pick carefully, you're right. That's one thing. And you're right. And there are basic things that you still require even the blow dry folks to go through. It's not like just a free-for-all where they can set up shop. But the protectionism of the competition was trying to hold them to a much higher level than they needed to be held to. So when I talk about things like deregulating or easing restrictions or reducing barriers to entry, that's an example. We made it easier for people to have blow dry bars, right? We've done this with massage therapists, people who do acupuncture. There's all sorts of things that have been restricted because one level above them, which is also a competition level, says, oh, no, that person has to have the same license I have, when it's not the same thing. So we've tried very hard to make some of those licenses easier to obtain. We've given interstate kind of recognition to licensees and license holders from, like, you come here from Michigan and you have a license to be a massage therapist, we're going to honor that license. We've opened those doors. We've made it easier in the state. I'm going to continue trying to do that. One thing I'm sponsoring this year has to do with licensing boards. If they choose to turn an applicant down because they've been convicted of a crime, which they can do in their past or in their history, that crime's going to have to be directly associated with or tied to that actual business or doing that business. They can't be because you got a DUI 6 years ago and they just don't like you, which is actually happening. You get these boards, you get these bureaucracies. They run wild with telling people what they can do. They almost sometimes become drunk with power. You have to contain that and make it easier for people just to live their free, economically prosperous life.
Does that help you at all? Any regulations that you would ease at all to make it easier to make a living for, especially the poor? We're talking about the poor.
I mean, and he knows this, and most of my colleagues know this. I do not really like for us to be putting up more barriers for people, regardless of what it is, right? I've been very clear about that. Just this year, we even dealt with something that to many people seems silly, but it was the eyelash application legislation,
Right.
and people are like, "Why are we even doing that?" Well, in the state of Arizona, it was they wanted you to go as if you were going to cosmetology school and go through all of like the hair. Like I was like, okay, you know what? I get my eyelashes done. I thought it was something that was simple. Okay. But there's a lot of bills sometimes that we see that sometimes try to make it harder for people to be able to succeed. I don't agree with those, but as a specific example, I don't really have one right now. That's a good question. I didn't think about that before coming in here. I do feel that we could do better, and I think the status quo is just not working sometimes. And we need to be innovative and find ways where we can help support individuals who do want to be able to, be productive and make a living, and that's really important. So I don't have a specific thing. I'm not going to come in here and say, like, let's deregulate everything, because I also don't agree with that. I think that we have to be, there are certain things that we could potentially do that would help, but I wouldn't say I have a specific idea
Okay.
right now, just because I haven't thought about
Okay.
that.
No, that's fine. Clearly, it is not working for a lot of people. If you're okay, we're going to open it up for questions. We're going to use this microphone. I'll have follow-up questions if need be, and we'll take it from there. I hope you were listening and taking notes and engaging and have this conversation. I'm just going to ask you to be respectful, and this is a dialogue, so we can We can have that, a dialogue. So
Also, I forgot to, I just realized, was it just me or did I see people getting tamales in the back?
Yes, there are tamales in the back.
Oh,
so
I
feel
was
free
like,
and
what?
grab some if you would like some. There are tamales.
Are they licensed tamales?
So we're going to open up questions to the audience. We just ask that you keep your questions short. Don't go on a monologue and keep it on topic. But otherwise, if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic.
Quiet group.
By the way, I love this shirt.
Which one?
Don't hurt people and don't take their things.
Oh.
That sums it up.
Hello, Jose Benito Rosales Chavez. I'm a professor here. I study informalized cultural relevant food venues. So I'm talking about taco stands and others, including home-based foods. And I like what you said that, it's good for everyone and not just for a specific group of people, and that we should remove barriers of entry. But I feel like we continue to perpetuate these structural and procedural injustices. If you think about who here has eaten a gourmet food trucks, right? And who has eaten a loncheras? Do you guys know what loncheras are? Mm-hmm. They're the Latino-based food trucks. But I'm thinking about specifically in Chicago, before the 2008 economic crash, a lot of these high-income, highly educated chefs lost their brick-and-mortar business, and all of a sudden they discovered food trucks. And that was a new way to start a business where all they had capital that they needed to start a restaurant. And within 2 years, they managed to change all their laws and regulations in the city to be allowed to be anywhere in the city. But in contrast, a group of migrant push cart vendors were trying to do the same thing. They still were not allowed to do that. So when they interview the people in power, the politicians, they say, well, this is what our community wants. They want these hipster gourmet food trucks, but not the other guys. So how is it that we continue to do the same here, and sometimes it's hard to when people. What would you say to people that said that it's not necessarily about public health, but it's more about class and minority groups, and because we should open the opportunities for everybody, but at the same time, when that happens, some people are allowed to practice it, but not others. And I'm just waiting for a group of high-income, affluent community members to discover that we can make a lot of money out of home, and all of a sudden, now it's allowed to be done.
I'll start really quickly. And we had a bill come up. It was the Kevin Payne bill. I don't know if Steph remembers. That was an interesting one. And that goes back. There were people that were saying, we don't want these trucks in our neighborhood. Like, we don't want them parked in our neighborhood. And that was literally the entire basis of that bill, which was where people can park their, in his view, it was his barbecue truck.
Yeah, he has a food truck
that
that
sells
barbecue.
Right? Barbecue. And he's like, if I want to park my truck in my neighborhood and provide food or sell food, then I should, But the issue was a lot of the people that were coming into, it was the HOAs that were coming in to testify saying this could be an issue because of traffic. And in my mind, I'm like, again, thinking there's always going to be people that have something to say, of course. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't care what neighborhood they're in or where specifically they want to park if they're not doing anything if they're not blocking an area and they're in their own area, in their own home or outside of their home, like they should be able to do that. But again, aesthetics, right? Like there are people that we don't like the way the trucks look and it's gonna make it's an obstacle for parking. And it goes back to certain communities already do this. Certain communities only do it within their community. And a lot of times it's because they're limited in where they can do it, right? So yeah, I think that's interesting because we did tackle that this past year and I believe it did pass. It definitely happens.
I'll add something to this. To get cut right to the heart of your question, I think what you're asking is why is a guy with a food truck selling lobster sandwiches different than the Mexican immigrant with a cart selling ice cream sandwiches? Why doesn't the guy with the cart get the same treatment that the guy with the lobster truck gets, right? Some of that has to do obviously with, believe it or not, some of that ties to zoning, okay, in certain cities, towns, counties, wherever they're doing this activity. She said the word aesthetics, so I'm going to piggyback off that. A lot of people don't want to see somebody pushing a junky-looking cart. A lot of people don't want to see a junky-looking food truck either, sitting on the side of the road selling food. I think they've been able to contain food trucks to streets, parking lots that are designated for this type of operation, you know, you run into another issue with somebody pushing a cart where they're going up neighborhood streets. They might be, you know, places people don't want them. That's an unfortunate reality of just the difference. Doesn't mean it's fair, but I think it kind of gets down to the root of your question. I think there's a certain tolerance of what people are willing to accept and deal with. I think food trucks are easier for people for some reason, especially if they're nice. And of course, that takes capital. It takes money, right? It's hard to get. I don't have a great answer, but I know it exists.
But I will just add one thing. I'm one of the Democrats that feels that sometimes preemption is a good thing. And he's heard me about, there's been many instances where we've dealt with situations where, you know, preemption is sometimes looked and viewed as like a bad thing, but sometimes it's actually a good thing, because we wanted to talk about equality and making sure that it doesn't matter where in the state they're able to do it.
Preemption, you mean what?
Preempting the cities so that they don't have their own regulation around where that person can
Right.
park
Or push their
truck.
cart.
Or push their cart on
Right.
a certain area, in
Right.
a certain area. So for me, that's like one place where I would be okay with saying, I'm okay with preemption. Because and a lot of times, you know, Democrats say no to preemption and Republicans say yes to preemption. But that's one of the issues that I feel, if we want to talk about equality, then it should be across the line for everybody.
same for everybody.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. On the same topic about this, I work for ASU as well at the Global Futures Laboratory. My name is Shandine. I was wondering what kind of protections are also being written into this bill, or if you know of any that you would maybe bring up or add to it, because we've been seeing a lot of vendor violence lately. And compared to like the food trucks that are established and then the vendor food trucks, there's even a struggle among those people. So what's being done with people who are, I don't know, just struggling to either have them in their neighborhood or they want to get them out because of aesthetics? What could be written in, or what do you see that could be added?
So did you say violence? Like you're talking about where like people come in and try to rob or grab food and just dash? And,
Robbing,
happens a lot.
Yeah.
throwing over their tables, their
like
carts.
like we see on Reels all the time.
Oh, I'll just say, I personally, I mean, I don't know, it doesn't sound like we've added that. We haven't had a
No, I mean
conversation about
that's
this yet.
already a crime. That's already a crime. I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of separate from food handling laws and statutes. You can't just run up to somebody's property and toss it. You know, now you're getting into a realm where is law enforcement doing their job when it comes to anything in the community. In some cases, I would say they aren't. In some cases, they probably aren't. But no, it's not part of the bill.
Yeah, I will say that I have heard of that actually happen quite a bit. And a lot of times, because these are individuals that are, again, just trying to get by and selling a little bit of whatever it is that they're selling, they only handle cash. And that's the other thing, is we have to think about the safety aspect for them as well. Because look, you go to Circle K now and it says no bills over $20. There's a reason for that. So when we're talking about these vendors who are out on the street or outside of a grocery store or wherever it is that they are, most people will know that they're carrying cash with them, and that also creates a lot of issues, right? So I have heard of that. I don't know. Again, these are conversations we're going to have.
They are. I will add real quick that we have to be very careful in our jobs and in politics that we don't always try to tailor everything to the worst case scenario, or if it's 10% of the occurrences or even 1% of the occurrences. But yet, that's what boils up and often gridlocks us. You know, it'll become that issue. And there's only so much we can do, right? We can't legislate morality. We can't legislate people's behaviors out on the street. We can't legislate good and bad. But we can just try to create that environment that allows people to live freely. And unfortunately, some of that stuff is just a product of a society that's in a bad place at times. And we all need to stand up against that kind of stuff, too.
Hi. So you were talking about when you introduced this bill, the next legislative session, you're making a couple of just small changes to the language, but not really changing the whole idea of it. I was wondering, especially because it seems a little bit clear there's a need for some sort of compromise to get a majority, and in perhaps the case of a supermajority. What sort of compromises are you guys willing to make in order for that to happen?
Oh, I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead. It's your bill.
I shouldn't, I can't compromise on the unknown. And I shouldn't have to compromise when my first vote was 52-8, okay? I had the supermajority. The Senate shouldn't have to find a compromise when it was 26-4. They had the supermajority. So you have to tell me why all those people changed their vote when nothing about the bill changed, except the governor said, I don't like it. That's really hard to compromise when that happens, because I've been given nothing from the governor of this state that says this would make me sign this bill. She's being controlled by special interests, and that's all you need to know. And I'm not going to highlight her like she's special. This happens to politicians on both sides of the aisle. I can't compromise that. I need people to do what's right and honor the will of the voters. And when 90% of both of those chambers is willing to vote for something, it's extremely rare that a Democrat or Republican governor will veto it. She needs to be asked why, because I can't answer that question. Now you get to
Yeah.
that.
Well, I want to start off by saying it's not my bill. A lot of people assume that it was my
But you got
bill.
sponsored, right?
You don't usually get sponsors.
I might have let her.
supported
I
it.
don't remember.
Yeah, he usually doesn't allow anyone to sign.
I just
on
throw
to
them in there and
Yeah,
say, let's go.
so I did not sign it. However, I did support it very vocally, obviously, and I'm still very supportive of the idea. I haven't even thought of, we haven't had these conversations about like what a compromise would look like, just because again, I don't know, as you said, it was widely supported, what that looks like to be able for me to convince my other colleagues who at this point probably don't have such a big appetite for this now because of everything that did happen. You know, I dealt with a lot during that time, and he remembers. I mean, I was told that people were going to run against me, which they are now. It's fine. But, you know, I was threatened from my election to not being a real Democrat, for being a sellout, that I just do whatever Republicans tell me. Like you name it, it was thrown out there. So that never changed my opinion on it, and that never will, because I'm not moved by things like that. But I do believe that we have to have a conversation if the goal is to be able to get everyone back on board, because again, you did mention it's election season. It's going to be an interesting year, I think, going into the session. We have new people that have joined us since this bill came around.
True.
So, you know, it's just in the legislature, yeah. So I just believe that we will have, and quite frankly, we haven't had a conversation, I mean, at all regarding this yet. We are supposed to have those conversations, and I'm always, and he knows this, I'm always happy to try and find a compromise and work with people, even with people across the aisle that I don't always necessarily agree with. I think that's part of the job that we were sent to do, is try to find ways to work together. And I chair like our bipartisan group that we have, and I think it's important. And if we truly want to create change and do things that are good and positive, we have to find ways to work together. So I'm always open to that. But again, we haven't even had those conversations just yet.
No,
but I'm sure we will.
We will have them.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. I'm Iracema Coronado. I'm director of the School of Transborder Studies here at ASU. And I came a little late, so I hope that my question is not an inappropriate one. But I'm looking for data on the informal economy in the Latino, Mexican, Hispanic community here in Phoenix. Does anyone here have any sources that we can use? And if not, we need a study to really document and have.
Are you asking specifically when it comes to the cottage food industry?
Yes, the informal economy, you know, gardeners, landscapers, people who clean houses, people who sell things on the street. I mean, I think it's something that's worthy of more research and to have better data.
So, you're right. The Institute for Justice brought me a lot of data, similar probably, but maybe not exactly like what you're looking for. But it talks about, I mean, there was a national survey of cottage food producers. Like, you could Google this and find it probably pretty quickly. And it would tell you that they're primarily women. They primarily live in rural areas. The majority, yes, when you start dissecting it demographically, it's Hispanic. Of course, some cities vary because of the immigration to that city might be from a different region of the world. But I don't have it to hand you. The data exists. I'd be happy, you could email me at my Arizona legislative account. I'm easy to find.
Of
It's
course.
just tgrantham@azledge.gov. And I could easily, you could ask that question via email, and I would forward you to the people who supplied me with data and be like, hey, what do you have here specifically? They could probably just send you something.
Great, thank
So
you
I'd be
very
happy
much.
to do that, so please do.
Thank you. I'm a political scientist, so I admire all politicians for
Yeah,
their good
yeah.
work. So thank you.
Well, we don't make the car, we just try to sell it. And, some of us are good at that and some aren't, but we try.
Is that something that you
Thank you.
can ask
Thank
the
you.
Arizona Department of Economic Security or the
Yeah,
State Department?
yeah.
Is that kind of data? Is that something that you can request or?
We can ask for it if they have it. I don't know if they have that data.
I'll say just really quickly, because a lot of times when we're talking about data, data's important, right? Like whenever we're talking about legislation or different issues, I like to see the data because again, that's what I went to school for. And it's important to have that background and also just the backup when you're speaking about something to say, no, this is actually the facts, right? I think one of the big obstacles when we are talking about specifically this industry, what I've seen is even when it was time for testifying, it was so hard for me to try to convince individuals in my community they agreed with me. I mean, the amount of calls and texts, I mean, I had people in the neighborhood where my mom used to live calling and texting me, like trying to get updates, and they were all very interested, but no one was willing to come out and speak because they were like concerned of like, oh, we don't want anyone to know that we're doing this. Like now that it's widely known that it's not something that's legal, we don't want to be in the public eye. So also the data a lot of times is not representative of the people that we're talking about. So I just want to be really clear on, I don't believe we have anything specific to the industry of Arizona here. It would be great. If you can email me too, I think that's something that we can even probably look at. As far as, we've been able to get funding for different universities to do research and data on other issues. I did one this past year on falls prevention for the U of A through the Department of Trauma Surgery. There's ways we can do that to be able to collect the data in areas that we actually need it in. So let's talk. I think that's a really good point that you have.
Can I just add on to that a little bit? One of the things we could do, and collaboratively in some fashion, is something that we did with hairdresser licensing boards across the country, which was to collect the data on what different states do in a single place, and as opposed to try to drill down in one place and try to cover every possibility, but to try to get, especially if there's boards that are making decisions, then to find out the nature of the board and the structures of the board. And we have one that's specifically addressed to hairdressing issues, so licensing board for hairdressing issues that we created at the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty on our website. But for other informal sector kind of occupations, it's possible to kind of do some things like that. So. Next question.
Thank you much for being here. I'm Paul Curice. I'm the director of the department that houses the Center for the Study of Economic Liberty. We're the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership. And I wanted to ask a background question about the phenomenon of the two of you from different parties sitting here, sharing a stage, having a reasonable conversation about what you agree about and disagree about, and a member of the local press here interviewing you. And I know that Representative Grantham's been in the legislature longer, and Representative Hernandez, you're newer to this, but as a general sense, reading about politics around the country, I get the sense that state legislatures have a healthier possibility for this kind of thing happening rather than what we see in Congress. There is a bipartisan problem solvers Congress and a problem solvers caucus in Congress. But what's your sense of the Arizona legislature and the how odd, Representative Hernandez, you said you're trying to be involved with or chair a bipartisan caucus. So is what you're doing here abnormal, fairly normal? What would you say about that?
It's normal. Here's what I'll say. 85-ish%, maybe 90% of what we do down there is like this. you only see the 10% on TV because that sells, okay?
Yeah.
And most of it's grossly misrepresented anyway, because not you, but a lot of our journalistic integrity is gone in a lot of places now, and they want to show you a fight, and they want to show you disagreement, and they want to show you the extreme of that side and the extreme of this side, and they don't want to show you anything else. And that's really unfortunate. She's my friend. I mean, a lot of times when we're up there, I run the chamber most times as Speaker Pro Tem, and like there will be ridiculous floor speeches happening. And this girl's sending me text messages like, could you please shut that guy up or that girl up? And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying, you know. So like, you know, there's a lot of camaraderie. Of course, we're never going to agree on everything. We don't agree on everything inter-party, right? But this goes on a lot. It's unfortunate that, you know, society doesn't know it because of what's put up on our televisions or on our news feeds as we're swiping, right? And it's done just to grab attention and click. I mean, you know, it's just not right. And people need to understand that the best way to get the answer to that, other than showing up to forums like this, is to come down to the State House, as boring as it sounds, and watch. Follow politicians on social media. Don't rely on news sources all the time, because a lot of times they're agendized. If you want to know what somebody really said about something, follow Alma. You know, if you want to know what Alma says about something, ask Alma, right?
But it is
That's
true
my
that
answer.
regardless of the media and regardless of how it is portrayed, I mean, the outcomes are the same. And so I guess to your question, is there hope that the outcomes will not be this partisan?
So I'll just say, I haven't been there as long as him, but I've been there 6 years now. And when I came in as I was the youngest woman ever elected. I was 25 when I got elected. I came in, my brother had already been serving with you for 4 years.
Yeah, for a little while.
Something.
Yeah.
For 3 or 4 years. And I came in as a former activist. I came in as a former activist in my community, and I was always brought up of, do what you feel is the right thing to do, even if it's not popular. My dad still to this day tells me that. And I even have my sister serves in the legislature with me. My brother retired now, but my sister serves with me, and I even have disagreements with her. And at the end of the day, I think, you know, I drive the 4 hours round trip from Tucson daily to go to work. And my job is not to please, and I've been very open and honest about everything that I say. I never say something that I'm going to have to, try not to at least, apologize for, because I believe what I'm saying. And that's, I don't care if you voted for me or not. At the end of the day, it's still my job to represent you in the district, whether you're a Democrat or Green Party, Libertarian, whatever you name it, I don't care. At the end of the day, that's still my job. So, you know, I strongly feel that, yes, things can get very partisan, partisan politics. I don't like it. I just feel it frustrates me because I don't feel that government should work that way. And that's just always been the way, that's how I was brought up. And I've always just been very clear of, okay, if I feel it's the right thing to do, at that point, if I've said I'm doing something, I almost never ever change my mind. Like very rarely. I don't remember the last time I changed my mind. Like there's times where me and my sister vote differently. It happens. But yes, for the last 6 years that I've been there, Senator TJ Shope and I have worked really hard. There's something called the Millennial Action Project. And I know that millennials get a bad rep, but we started this kind of like an official caucus, which is a bipartisan group. And we've tried our hardest over the years. We've killed bad legislation and we've helped pass good legislation. And that's because we've been able to work together. And at the end of the day, again, I don't care. A lot of times the public just sees the fights, that are on social media or in the press. A lot of us actually talk outside of politics. People, but it's also like, if you respect me, I'll respect you type of situation, right? I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. And we do have colleagues on both sides that refuse to speak to other colleagues because of their party affiliation. And that's on them. That is not why I was sent to the Capitol. And I'm trying my hardest to break that. Yeah. I think that we cannot function as a society or really as a government by being that way. I have colleagues on your side that I'll still say hi to and good morning, every day and I never receive a response, and that's okay. I'm still going to continue saying hi. You know, that's just how I was brought up. But we can't control everyone and the things that they do. But at least I know I'm committed to trying my best to remove all of the fighting when it comes to politics, and at the end of the day, doing what I feel is the right thing to do.
I was going to follow up with that. Do you really think that things are a lot better than portrayed on TV and in the media? And do you have other Democrats that you have the kind of relationship that you have with her? So you kind of just answered that, right? That there are people that just don't talk to you. Do you have other Democrats that are as friendly? And are things truly a lot better than what they see? Which goes to his question.
Okay, our number.
You have Democratic friends. You're on the record.
Yes, absolutely. So it's funny. I'm a National Guard officer and pilot. I've been in the Arizona Air Guard for 23 years. I'm a lieutenant colonel. I fly a KC-135. I deploy with and I serve alongside members that are Democrats and members that are Republican. And we have some of the best debates you could ever imagine in an airplane when we have like hours to be together and we can't get away from each other. One of my greatest friends down there, his last name is DeConcini. He was an F-16 pilot, and now he flies the airplane that I fly. And his dad was a senator here years ago, and his political affiliation is not the same as mine. And we're buddies. It's the same at the legislature. Unfortunately, it's not as bad as it seems, because if it was as bad as it seems, we wouldn't have a state budget that was bipartisan. We wouldn't be increasing funding for things like public education, which we are, even though people claim we're not. We wouldn't be accomplishing things, hundreds of millions of dollars into our transportation infrastructure in this state, attracting companies like TSMC that are coming from Taiwan and building semiconductors here, incentivizing them, and Intel. Funding higher education. I mean, we have increased funding for K-12 and all the colleges and universities, and there's so many things that take Republican and Democrat agreement, and that just isn't exciting. So unfortunately, unless you're a wonk, what I refer to as a policy wonk, who you ever want to put yourself to sleep at night, start reading the state budget or legislation or something. But that's a product of that bipartisanship.
Yeah, and so I'll just add.
It has to exist.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing, especially if you look at the makeup of the legislature, which a lot of people don't really know. There's 31 Republicans, 29 Democrats. You need 31 votes to pass a bill. And at the end of the day, sometimes, whether they like it or not, they need us.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. When you are when the divide is that 31-29, and in the Senate it's 14-16.
Right. It's not a real majority.
Yeah.
We don't have a real majority.
It's not a super majority as it used to be.
Yeah.
But a lot of times he has colleagues that still think they're in a super majority, and we have to remind them they're not. And that's just the reality, is when you are in a makeup like that, you have to work together. You just have to. Because there's been situations where they can't even get all their members on board. And they need to work with us.
And I will say, if we do nothing down there, that's not a bad thing for all of you. No, really, you would not believe the ideas that politicians bring down there. Thousands of bills get introduced, and they are not good ideas. So gridlock, by design, in a representative republic is a really good thing.
So are we expecting next year to have a quick bipartisan budget, all the great stuff that you mentioned that worked this year? If we were to come back early next year, are we going to have that as well?
I think we will have a beginning that is unified, a middle that is divided, and an end that is unified. And that is unfortunately that kind of has to happen. That's the natural occurrence of things. You kind of have to all come together, then you have to fight about it, and then you have to come together. We all want to get out of there. Constitutionally, we're supposed to be there no more than 100 days. And we start every year on the second Tuesday in January. I don't want to be there past 75 days.
Like this year?
Like this year. We were there 180.
Was it 200?
Whatever.
220 or something?
Seems like an eternity. So, we don't get paid extra when we're down there. And it's an enormous time suck. And it's like staying out after midnight. Nothing good happens. The later it gets, the worse it gets. If the sun comes up, heaven help us, you know, the whole stay out after midnight thing. Not that they've ever done that. You know,
Right.
maybe Alma can talk to us about that. But
Is it gonna get, or is gonna be the
I'll
same?
be realistic, you know, and optimist. Like, yes, I'd love nothing more than for us to go there, get it done, and move on with our lives and go campaign because it's election season.
or go
However,
home.
huh?
Or go home.
Or go home. Yeah. There's some people who are not running again. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think it is election season. When you are in a split the way that we are and the way that things are going across the country with elections, it's going to be a battle. That's just the reality. And whether you think it's fortunate or unfortunate, I don't know. You know, we all have our opinions. I would like for us to get out of there quickly just because I do not want to be there 220 days again. Because let me tell you, it is not fun driving in from Tucson daily to just say, hi, I'm here, and then, oh, we're done for the day. That is not fun. And there's people that have to do it from even further than Tucson. And it is not an effective way to run government. And it's not an effective way for us to live our lives because we also have a life outside of this, right? So I would love nothing more than for us to get in there, get out. I just don't see how that happens during an election time where everyone's going to want to get up and give their speeches to use for their campaigns and so on. So it'll be interesting, but go ahead.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. And actually, I don't know, I'm feeling magnanimous today. I'd like to, if you would join me, applaud our two representatives for their participation.